Nesna, South Africa, June the 20th, 2010. The French national football team is on their team bus. The curtains are drawn. The session was supposed to start 20 minutes ago. The coaching staff are standing outside, the media are gathering, and nobody is coming out. Inside that bus, 23 professional footballers, some of the most famous players in Europe, had made a decision. They would not train. They would not follow orders. They would not cooperate. In full view of the world's media at a FIFA World Cup, the French national team was on strike. Nothing like this had ever happened before at a World Cup, and nothing quite like it has happened since. This is the story of how a World Cup team destroyed itself from the inside, in front of the entire planet. And it began long before anyone got on that bus. Raymond Domenech had been the France national team manager since 2004. 6 years. 2 major tournaments, a World Cup final in 2006 where Zinedine Zidane's headbutt overshadowed everything, a disastrous Euro 2008 elimination at the group stage. 6 years of growing resentment from players, media, and fans who questioned his methods, his selections, and his judgment. But perhaps the most extraordinary detail of all was this. Domenech publicly admitted to consulting astrology when selecting his squads. He expressed reservations about players born under the sign of Scorpio. He was reportedly suspicious of certain star signs. At the highest level of international football, the manager of the French national team was choosing players based on the position of the stars. For the players in that dressing room, this was not a small detail. It was a daily reminder that the man in charge had lost their respect long before South Africa. France didn't even arrive at the 2010 World Cup cleanly. In November 2009, they faced the Republic of Ireland in a World Cup playoff. With the score level and the tie going to extra time, something happened that would haunt the entire tournament. Thierry Henry controlled the ball twice with his left hand before crossing for William Gallas to score. France were through. Ireland were out. Henry admitted to the handball afterwards. FIFA refused to allow a replay, and France arrived at the 2010 World Cup carrying not just the weight of expectation but something even heavier. The knowledge that they didn't fully deserve to be there. That knowledge doesn't sit quietly in a dressing room. It festers. France's first match of the 2010 World Cup was against Uruguay. They drew 0-0. The performance was flat. The football was poor. There were already signs that Domenech's squad had no cohesion, no identity, no collective understanding of how they were meant to play. But a draw isn't a crisis. A crisis was coming. The second match was against Mexico, and it was here that everything collapsed. France played poorly throughout the first half. Domenech had promised Nicolas Anelka before the tournament that he would be the central striker, the man the team was built around. Instead, the system left Anelka isolated, ineffective, and increasingly frustrated. At halftime, France were losing 2-0, and what happened in the dressing room at that moment would change the trajectory of the entire tournament. In the dressing room at halftime, Raymond Domenech confronted Nicolas Anelka about his first-half performance. He criticized Anelka publicly in front of the squad. Anelka had already privately told confidants before the tournament that he was unhappy with how Domenech was using him, that the coach had made him promises he wasn't keeping, that he felt disrespected. None of that came out calmly at halftime. What Anelka said next became the most famous insult in French football history. In front of his entire squad, he told his manager to go and do something that cannot be repeated here in the words he used. The insult was crude, direct, and devastating. Captain Patrice Evra stepped in to stop the argument escalating further. The second half began. On the pitch, France lost 2-0. In the dressing room, something had broken that could not be fixed. Somebody leaked. The Federation's press office didn't manage the situation quietly. Instead, L'Équipe published the exact words Anelka had used, in full, in French, on the front page. What had been a private dressing room incident became an international incident overnight. France's Federation President Jean-Pierre Escalette demanded an apology from Anelka. Anelka refused, and so the Federation made a decision that would ignite everything. They sent him home. Nicolas Anelka was expelled from the French World Cup squad on the 19th of June 2010. He had refused to apologize. The federation had refused to back down. He left, and the players who remained in the camp made a decision of their own. On the morning of June the 20th, the French squad boarded their team bus as normal. Then nobody got off. They drew the curtains. They held their own meeting inside. Outside, the coaching staff waited. The media gathered. The world watched. And Domenech, the man nominally in charge of this squad, was left standing in a South African car park while his players decided his fate without him. The players released a statement. It declared their opposition to the federation's decision to expel Nicolas Anelka. It claimed Anelka had tried to seek dialogue and been ignored. It was read aloud by William Gallas standing at the bus door in the South African sun. And then something happened that has no precedent in football history. Raymond Domenech, the manager of the French national football team at the World Cup, stood at a press conference and read out his own players' strike statement. The statement that declared opposition to his federation. The statement drafted in solidarity with the player who had just insulted him to his face. He read every word in front of the world's media because there was nothing else he could do. The federation's managing director, watching from the side, quit his role in a fit of rage before the day was over. In France, the story exploded beyond football entirely. Politicians condemned the players publicly. The sports minister called it a moral disaster. Newspapers debated whether the players were role models for children, with the extraordinary answer emerging that they clearly were not. The Secretary of State for Sport was sent to South Africa. A World Cup was being discussed in the French Parliament, and France still had one match to play. France needed to beat South Africa to survive. They started the match still broken internally. Domenech had dropped Evra from the starting lineup as punishment for his leading role in the mutiny. And then, in the 26th minute, Yoann Gourcuff, the young talent who was supposed to be France's future, was sent off. 10 men, the tournament effectively over before half-time. France lost 2-1 to South Africa. They finished bottom of their group, with 1 goal and 1 point from 3 matches, eliminated at the group stage of a World Cup they had controversially qualified for and then publicly destroyed. And as the final whistle blew, Raymond Domenech added one final act of defiance to his extraordinary tenure. Laurent Blanc replaced Domenech immediately. His first act was extraordinary. He suspended all 23 members of the World Cup squad for his first game in charge, every single one of them. None of the players who were there would escape accountability. Then the formal sanctions began. Nicolas Anelka received an 18-match ban from international football. He never played for France again. He finished with 69 caps and 14 goals, a career that produced some of the finest club football of his era, ended not with a final match or a graceful farewell, but with a bus and a statement in a flight home from South Africa. Patrice Evra was banned for 5 international matches, Franck Ribéry for 3. The federation withheld the World Cup bonuses from every player. Laurent Blanc rebuilt French football from the wreckage of Knysna. He brought order, accountability, and a clear identity back to the dressing room. Then Didier Deschamps continued the work, and 8 years after the bus in Russia in 2018, France lifted the World Cup. The generation that came after Knysna, Mbappé, Griezmann, Pogba, Giroud, knew the story. They had grown up with it as a warning. This is what happens when a squad turns on itself. This is what the beautiful game looks like when it breaks. The Knysna bus is now part of football history, a shorthand for what happens when a dressing room loses its integrity, when a manager loses his squad, when the gap between the people in charge and the people on the pitch becomes so wide that it tears apart in public. It is studied in coaching courses, referenced in post-mortems, held up as the example nobody wants to follow. And in France, when they lifted the trophy in 2018, part of what made it feel so complete was the memory of what happened in 2010, the knowledge of how far they had come, and the bus they had finally left behind. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you'd like to hear more stories, subscribe. I'd like to hear your thoughts about the situation in the comments. I appreciate you for listening. Until next time, see you on the other side of the pitch.